Well,
Let's see.
okay,
I can just hear you struggling in the background.
because I am struggling in the background. Okay, good morning to everybody in Clubhouse. Timothy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thank you. All right, so good morning to everybody. We're starting the live stream now, of course, with the intro that Richard Berger created for us. Here we go.
Woohoo! Ride the horse. Woo! Where's Kimono Lady? Moonwalk! Moonwalk! Oh! Here comes Maya. Oh! Dot.
Here we go. Good morning to you again, Timothy.
Good morning, Maya. How are you doing? It's Easter Sunday.
It is Easter Sunday, yes, and thank you very much for being here.
113.
Indeed, 113th episode. Thank you for your persistence, consistency, preparation, and everything. So, how are you today, Timothy?
I'm good. It is nice and sunny out here in Katsuyama on the Chiba Peninsula. Wind is
Great.
good, so we'll do the briefing. We'll have maybe 30, 40 minutes of Q&A, and then I'm off.
Sounds great. Well, I don't want to keep anybody waiting any longer, so I hope that you're fine with this too. So let's dive directly into the briefing so that, yes, okay.
Let's get right into it. Thank you very much, Maya.
Thank you.
And good morning once again, everybody. Happy Easter and happy April 9th. Today is the 9th day of April. It is the day that the Bank of Japan Governor Kuroda steps aside and Mr. Ueda steps in. It's a significant day for a lot of different reasons, but currently the Prime Minister is enjoying unbelievably high numbers. His approval rating now stands, according to certain estimates, at around 48%. You might remember that recently we've been talking about him being in the high 20s, the low 30s for the longest period of time. He got a great boost in the arm by visiting Kiev and meeting with the president there, Zelensky, and also passing the budget, the main thing that the Diet is supposed to do in this first session until June 23. That's the end of this Diet session, and building up to the elections that we are in today. So the main focus of today's briefing is going to be about the elections, but there are other things that are going on of particular importance. With regard to the Prime Minister, though, so we can touch on that and move along, he's been very quiet this last week because we are in elections, and we're in an election phase. So there's an election today for 9 governors and some mayors of large cities, and also the campaign for one upper house Diet member started on Thursday, and that will culminate on the 23rd for an election there. So the campaigning for House of Councilors members is a little bit longer than for the House of Representatives members. So the House of Councilor members, there is an open seat because of a resignation, started on Thursday. And on Tuesday this week, election campaigns start for 4 open parliamentary seats, lower house seats, and then maybe 2,000 plus municipal seats, prefectural seats, and that sort of thing. So the first is the governors and a couple of mayors, and then we've got 5 members of the Diet and maybe 2,000 plus members of the local assemblies. So I'll get into that just a little bit more. There has been some action, and also, Maya, we wanted to talk about a couple of things that were brought up during the Q&A period last week. So not everybody is listening in on the Q&A. We had the briefing here that is offered on LinkedIn, and it is ported over immediately to YouTube. But the Q&A period is exclusively on Clubhouse, isn't that right?
It is, yes, that's true. So we'll move, once you finish the briefing here, we'll move to Clubhouse and continue there with the Q&A and also comments from the people who are there.
Right. So two of the issues I think we wanted to delve into a little bit in this briefing was something about the Ainu. Remember, there was a question about Ainu, and I think a lot of people were
Yes, we
curious
talked
about that.
about that last week, and
Right. Then there was the resignation or the
yes,
expulsion of a member of the upper house because he refused to attend any of the Diet hearings. And there were a couple of questions about that. It is kind of important. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, there is one more issue. Remember, we were talking about how the government or how Mr. Kishida plans to pay for this tremendous increase in defense expenditures. One was hit the tobacco, one was hit the consumer, hit the corporates, and then we've got these assets that the government holds, and we're going to manage those a little bit more cleverly to generate 1 trillion yen every year for the next 5 years. Remember?
yes,
So
I remember
those,
that.
okay, well, so those are the three things we should weave in maybe towards the end of our conversation today.
Absolutely,
Okay?
yes. Let's do that.
Okay, so the prime minister is sitting pretty. He's in diet sessions, and the person who's really busy these days is Foreign Minister Hayashi. He was in Brussels for 2 days this last week, and importantly, he was in China on Saturday and Sunday last week. Then he went to Brussels for a two-day conclave and made some agreements and some news all over the place, actually. So he's on a roll. Japan is on a roll. There's a lot going on in the Asia Pacific region, Indo-Pacific region for this peace and security and open navigation and this coalition of like-minded countries. So there's an awful lot going on in those areas, even though it doesn't reach the level of being reported by the national press or even followed even internationally. But there is a lot going on. And probably what you're going to see is we're reading the tea leaves now after the election, after the 23rd. So that will be in what, today is the 9th. So next week will be the election. Is it 2 weeks from now? Then things will begin to settle out. Today is also, well, actually yesterday was the last day that the prime minister could have closed down the lower house in time to have a double election or have an election that culminates at the same time as this national election that's going on. So he's missed that opportunity for a lot of strategic reasons, but it doesn't cancel the fact that after these elections, and should the LDP do really well and his numbers go beyond 50%, which is somewhat likely, that he could call a snap election. Once again, if you're looking at the internal dynamics, that is an unlikely scenario because in less than a month, we've got the G7. So with G7, that is going to be held in Hiroshima, the prime minister's home district. And it was just announced, I think yesterday, the White House let out that President Joe Biden will not be visiting Nagasaki, which was a great hope by Mr. Kishida and certainly by the mayor of Nagasaki. A sitting president has never visited Nagasaki, and it was only Barack Obama who visited Hiroshima, the first president to visit, the atomic bomb capital. And you'll remember that at that time, Joe Biden was vice president. So this is a pretty much a bee in his bonnet. He wants to do that. He wants to get the fanfare that is generated as a result of that. But also, Mr. Kishida wants to generate a lot of hay from that because he's got other designs on his election and his status, and him repeating what Mr. Abe did by being, the longest-serving prime minister in Japanese history. So that is the goal that he is aiming for. Is this wind bothering you, Maya? Can you pick that up? Great, great.
No, I cannot. No, not a problem with the wind.
Great. It's
Yes.
this fancy microphone with all the hair on it that you got for me. Thank you.
Right. Yes.
So Hayashi, this time last week was in China you know that there was a Japanese businessman who is representing a foreign pharmaceutical. What's the name of the company? It's AstraZeneca. Astellas Pharma, representing Astellas Pharma, and he was arrested and held incommunicado by the Chinese authorities for espionage. It's very rarely happens that a Japanese national will be captured for espionage. It happens very, very rarely. This fellow was picked up about 3 weeks ago and has been in captivity and unavailable for diplomatic since then. So it wasn't the only reason why the foreign minister went to China, but it actually turned out to be one of the biggest items that he was talking about. He received a rather icy might not be a frosty reception, and he didn't come back with the Japanese businessman, but they did make their concerns known. So more is left to be seen there. But the tensions between Japan and China, as much effort as being put into repairing those relations, seems to be pretty much on hold. This is happening at the same time when the president of Taiwan is in the United States, visiting with Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House. This is a pretty big deal. They were worried that the Chinese would do something like what they did on the aftermath of Speaker of the House Pelosi visiting Taiwan about 2-3 months ago. This time, the president is visiting not Washington, D.C., but only California. So I guess there's a little bit of a temperament being applied here to gauge and to test and to maybe as a reaction to negotiations that were had to keep the tensions down. Just don't send her to Washington, D.C., and we'll be a little bit polite, but you better follow what we want, because if she goes to Washington, D.C., we're going to be more upset. So maybe that's part of the deal, but there's a lot going on internationally. The other thing that's happened with Mr. Hayashi, he met, as I said, in Brussels for 2 days of meetings with other NATO and the foreign ministers of other countries within the alliance. Finland joined NATO, and that's a very big deal. And Sweden kind of, their application for NATO was not agreed to by all of they need a quorum for acceptance, and Turkey has said that's not going to stand. Finland is okay, but Sweden is not. So that puts Sweden in a pretty much of a bind. This enclosure, this wrapping around of Russia by NATO forces, the whole thing that started this Ukraine situation, continues unabated, it seems. But the other thing that came out of Brussels is that Hayashi, Foreign Minister Hayashi, pledged another tranche of Japanese investment or funds to Ukraine. In his speech, in his conversations with the Ukrainian foreign minister, Japan has pledged seamlessly and steadily another tranche of money, and this is in the amount of 7.6 billion US dollars. I think that's a pretty big amount of money. That's actually the amount of money that Japan has so far pledged, and it was explicitly stated this is in addition to the money that was already promised. So you might remember that Ukraine started, Japan was not fully engaged in terms of giving because the Constitution prevents them from providing offensive military wear, so they were providing defensive military wear, helmets, rations, and tents, and that sort of thing. That amounted to about a little bit less than $2 billion US dollars throughout the entire first year of the controversy. And then as we moved into the second year, another 5 billion was promised. So that brought the entire total up to 7. And that happened very quickly, probably as a lead up to Mr. Kishida visiting with Zelensky. I don't know why it would have to have any money tied to that, but it's this coalition of forces pretty much driven by, the desires of the United States and this coalition of like-minded countries. And now to come in once again for another doubling down tells you something else is coming up pretty quickly. So you need to keep your eye on that, and Hayashi has been working very much on it. The other thing that came out of it is, you'll remember towards the end of last year, there were 3 documents published by the Japanese government for defense strategy, for a 10-year plan for the Japanese to build up their defense forces. Among that, taking their defense allotment of the gross domestic product each year from 1% to 2%, and how they're going to do that, and where they're going to spend that money, and how that money is going to be coming out. So that's one of the issues, how that money is coming out, those 4 tranches that we talked about, hitting tobacco, hitting the consumer, hitting corporates, and then more adroitly handling the assets that is held by the Japanese government. But what's come out this last week as a component of the defense strategy that was published in December is this overseas security assistance. So the Japanese have been known, I think everybody here on this briefing understands that, Japan has been known for checkbook diplomacy. They don't send people or personnel. They send equipment, they send Kubota tractors, they help build infrastructure, and they send money over to help depressed countries or countries that they're trying to build influence with. And for the first time now, they are doing it with defense-related earmarked money, probably material as well. But they've formed a design to bring in more people, more countries. There's going to be the Philippines first of all, and we've already seen that with some of the Coast Guard vessels being donated to the Philippines. Also, Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Fiji will be countries that will be quickly receiving overseas defense assistance. And this is a new step for Japan. This is something that they haven't done in the past. And it is also this building of this massive coalition, probably as a deterrent, not probably, absolutely as a deterrent for China, should they have designs on Taiwan. Taiwan is also getting nervous, as you might have followed in the news, that the kind of assistance that they're receiving from the United States and from the like-minded countries is not the kind that they want. It's kind of like Zelensky asking for, advanced fighter jets. You're giving us bullets and ammunition and artillery, but we want the really good stuff. So there's that's founded on a fear that they're beginning to lose a grip on the battlefield situation, and they really need more assistance. But I think with Taiwan, they see that they are outgunned, they're outmaneuvered by China. Should China absolutely decide to take Taiwan, I don't think that there's any disagreement that they could achieve that. They're close enough and they have enough firepower to do that. And so the idea is just to make it ultimately a bad move, a bad decision to do that. And that's why this coalition of forces has been just on steroids, and the building has gone on. Japan is an active participant in that. Japan has also said in Brussels that they want to have a more active involvement of the European states in the Indo-Pacific to create this freedom of navigation and to support what Japan is doing. So there's more likely to be, even though we've all noticed the number of foreign tourists on the streets these days, more increasingly it will be sailors and soldiers from NATO and NATO-affiliated countries coming to Japan. The British have already signed an agreement with Japan where they can share forces, something like the Status of Forces Agreement enjoyed by the United States and Japan. And also Australia is in line to pursue the same sort of agreement. So everything is in flux. The Japan that you knew of 20 years ago, and Japan is number one. That period we went through when the Ministry of International Trade and Industry was the juggernaut of Japanese dominance throughout the world. That time has changed. We are moving into a completely new era. Speaking of moving into a new era, on May 8th, the Japanese government has decided that COVID will be finished. So all of the COVID measures will end on May 8th. That's exactly 1 month ago, 1 month from now. But as you walk around town, as you go to different meetings and restaurants, that sort of thing, you know that the mask mandate has already fallen. Children are going through their graduation and for their incoming ceremonies for going to school without the masks or with a mask. You can make your own decision on masks. So that was pretty heavily in the news as well. So you're seeing not just a change internally in Japan as we're moving forward, but also externally too, in terms of what's going on with the economy today. Like I said, Haruhiko Kuroda ends his 10-year term as governor of the Bank of Japan. He was considered, now in retrospect, something of a revolutionary, an individual whose time had come. He joined forces with new Prime Minister Abe. The LDP had lost their seat, and they didn't want to do that again. They came back, and as a newly elected Prime Minister, he tapped Kuroda to help him. There wasn't a lot of high expectations for Kuroda at that time. He was typically considered a bureaucrat within the Ministry of Finance. He was, I think when he was tapped, he was the Japan representative for the IMF, living in Malaysia, I believe, and came back to Japan to head that up. He's now being replaced by Kazuo Ueda, who is an academic, actually, the first academic to hold that seat. And people are very curious, is he going to be holding and towing the line of Kuroda? And I think everybody understands that that's just not viable. And even though Mr. Kuroda did invest more than 11 trillion over his 10 years in buying bonds and in making the Japanese government an investor of almost first resort throughout the world, $11 trillion was spent to keep the cost of money low in Japan, to press down inflation, and he did some. They were somewhat successful. They, together with Mr. Abe, they came up with the 3 arrows strategy, where they focused on monetary policy, fiscal policy, and regulatory reform. This benefited, to a large degree, the fat cats and the corporations during this period of time. It did keep stability throughout the markets at a certain cost, though. And so I think you will see that Mr. Ueda, after he has a little bit of time to grow into his position, I think under Mr. Kishida's leadership, you will see some dramatic changes. And so the world markets are sitting and watching this. When Mr. Kuroda had his last meeting in Malaysia with the group of central bank leaders, he received, obviously, I guess it's deserved, a standing ovation from the entire group. That was 2 weeks ago. A very moving time for him, obviously. But Maya, did you want to say something? Or did you just want to interject?
No, I want to interject and show off that I was here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I thought you liked Kuroda, so you wanted to say something. So he will be missed, and obviously Mr. Ueda will be judged by what Mr. Kuroda did, 10 years in that position. So it's a very significant thing. I'd like to just move on from there to the elections that are being held today. So just to put it into context, once again, it's kind of like a 2-step phase that we're in. The first phase culminates on elections today, and those elections are for 9 governors. So there are 47 prefectures. That means there are 47 governors. 9 of them are having their governor's elections today. And then within those prefectures, there are several cities who will be electing their mayors. So it's not everybody. I think it's probably maybe 15 or 20 elections that are going on. And one of the elections that started on Thursday was for the House of Councilors, the upper house seat that was vacated when the sitting when the sitting House of Councilors member resigned. So that seat is open, and that candidate and the candidates for that position started running. Their campaign started on Thursday. They have a couple of days longer of a campaign period than the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives campaign starts in 2 days, 3 days, on Tuesday, and it culminates on the 23rd. And at the same time, the elections for 2,000 municipal seats and some other pickup mayors of larger cities and let me see. In 41 prefectures, these municipal seats, and then there are 17 big cities who will also hold municipal elections. So in total, it's a little bit more than 2,000 seats that will be running. And if you're walking in the streets, I think anywhere in these election districts, you're going to see these big boards that have numbers on them. And those numbers are where the faces will be put up for the candidates. And the reason why they're numbered sequentially, but when you're running for a position in one of these elections, you have a draw by where your picture will be placed. You can't choose number 13 because it's in the middle, or you can't put it on the corner where you think the I value will be the greatest. So all of these pictures of the candidates will be posted there throughout the various districts. Part of this is paid for by the state, and part of it is paid by the campaign. And it's a real interesting process. I don't want to get too much into the weeds of it, but the LDP is running in 5 districts for diet seats. The LDP already has 3 of those positions, and 2 are kind of up for grabs. And they say if the LDP candidates win in these 3, then Mr. Kishida is doing fine. He's kind of okay. It's a barometer of his standing. I don't know if it's really that accurate because the die has already been cast. The LDP is likely to win in these 3 seats in any event. It really depends on these other 2 that are real fighting places for the LDP and for the opposition parties. The more important part is the municipal elections. So the Constitutional Democratic Party, Komeito, the LDP are all struggling. There are 6 other political parties that are also fighting for it. And we will know on the 23rd what the shakeout is. With the Prime Minister's approval rating now at 48%, and in the news so prominently and positively, going to Kiev, having all of the visitors and visiting Joe Biden and having that whirlwind trip that he did, in spite of some of the detractors, the fact that he gave Mr. Zelensky maybe a suggestive gift when he visited him, or that his son was taking photographs and maybe going on what some would consider a tour while the Prime Minister is visiting France and England and the United States, which is somewhat inaccurate, but yeah, I guess you can throw darts at him. In spite of those criticisms, his popularity is rising, and he's juicing that as much as he can. And that's why this last week, I think he's been particularly quiet as the election campaign goes on. You're going to see much more noise, much more heat. You're going to feel something else coming up that will be pretty positive towards the Prime Minister in the coming weeks. So we're going to be watching that very closely. And maybe as we move into the Q&A period, we can deal with some of these other issues that are out there. Let me see what else. The other kind of thing that was going on this last week was the indictment of former President Trump in the United States. And that really ate up a lot of press time. So competing with that is a little bit difficult for Japanese news, because the United States, what's going on there, and former President Trump being such a dynamic political figure, it really did eat up a lot of press time and took a lot of news time as well. That and Japanese baseball, it's still lingering on. So it's you can't say it's a slow press day, but it has been somewhat consumed by other issues. The final, Maya, I'm ready to roll into talking about Ainu and the Seiji Josei 48 party, unless there's some issues we should talk about.
Well, I think that we can go on and dive into those two
Okay.
areas. So
Okay.
let's do that.
So the question last week was, there is a member of the upper house who didn't attend any of the upper house meetings, and he's living in Dubai. And there was a movement going on in the upper house to expel him. And what's the story with that, and what's the background of that? We've been asked. So I'd like to give you a little bit of a briefing on that. So we have to start a little bit back. You might remember the NHK party. There was an individual by the name of Satoshi Hamada who started a party. He's so mad. He used to work at NHK. He was so mad at NHK taking fees from people, whether they have a television or not, knocking on the door, taking this tax, being very arrogant and abrupt about it. He was so mad about that. He ran for office, and he won off in an office. In the upper house, there are two kinds of elections. There are two kinds of members. One is the member that you write their name in. They win on the value of their name recognition. That's a direct representation. And the other part of the diet seats in the upper house, and this is also represented in the lower house too, is a proportional seat. So there are some seats that you just vote for the party, and the party has a list, number one on the list, number two on the list. And if after all of the votes are tallied, your political party has 10 votes and the second political party has 9 votes, you might get to take number one on your list and number two on your list, and the person who was at number 10, they only get to pick number one on their list. So let's beat the NHK was on this political party, and they were down the list, but they got enough votes, they got enough recognition to have one member elected, and that was Mr. Hamada. And so he received maybe 28,000 votes in this proportional representation. So there are other political parties that got far more than that. So on their list, they got to pick maybe the first 5 or 6. But with, let's punch out the NHK received enough to elect one party member, and that was Mr. Hamada. So he formed a party called Let's Get NHK. And in fact, there were a couple of municipal seats that he was also able to gather as well. 21 actually out of the maybe 30,000 municipal seats that are available. So the Let's Bust the NHK party is also running in the elections that are going on starting on Tuesday, and they will have lots of candidates there, so their numbers might increase. But he was able in the last election, the upper house election just last year, to get one more diet member, because this fellow was just on fire. He was reporting on YouTube what's going on in Japanese politics. He's complaining about diet members falling asleep. He'll have video capture of them dozing off, or some of the scandals that are going on, particularly with celebrities. So he was just a real rabble rouser, and people love that. Bunshun does great business here because people love a scandal, and they already feel like they're not getting the full story, they're not getting the full news from the conventional press, so they go to these other sources. And it turns out that his YouTube channel called Gassy, Gaassyy, was doing fantastic. He had lots of followers, and in this proportional representation, not only did Mr. Hamada win again, but also he got this another vote for this fellow who was starting it up. His name is Higashitani Yoshikazu. So he won the election without even being in Japan, without even campaigning. And he won the election, and then even in the open diet ceremony, he didn't show up. He didn't show up to receive his badge, as a lot of people do. And he was never here to attend in person any diet sessions. He was attending virtually and reported to the committees that he was assigned to, I'm having trouble getting back to Japan. In fact, he was worried that there would be a arrest warrant applied to him because of all of this smearing that he had done to very famous individuals, not just members of the Diet, but also, underworld figures and movie stars and actresses and that sort of thing. So he was loved and he was hated at the same time. He was fearful of coming back to Japan. As the Diet is in session, a member of the Diet cannot be arrested. You can't. There can be no arrest made to them if they're speeding, if they're drunk, whatever. They get a pass on that when the Diet is in session. So he didn't attend. He could have attended, I guess, and not been worried about being arrested. But I think he was worried about more things than that. And what happened in February 22nd was a committee on the Upper House Administrative Committee had a vote, and they said, we're going to kick this guy off if he doesn't show up for Diet proceedings. It is his obligation. He's receiving a salary. He's not even in Japan. And it seems that he has no intention of participating in these sessions that he has been voted to represent his constituency. And he didn't show up. And by a vote of, 235 votes from the upper house, not everybody voted, but it was certainly more than a quorum, 235 to 1. So you know who the one is, the one person who is also in the Let's Get the NHK party voted against it. So he was expelled. It's the first time since 1951 that a member of the Diet has been expelled for not attending these meetings. And it's the first time for an upper house member to be expelled like this. So it was something, very newsworthy. And he probably will stay out of Japan because of all of the kerfuffle that he's caused. And so we will see now. They changed the name, by the way, just recently. That was what was, who is this Seiji Josei 48 party? So it's like, what's the name of that group? Akihabara 48, is it, Maya? So all the girls that dance and sing, and they're all in unison, and they wear
AKB 48.
AKB, right.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a play on that, and he wants to generate more people. It's Seiji Josei. We're going to have political women, 48 political women. That's going to be the name of our party. He doesn't have 48 people. So we will see how that plays out. But that's the name of the party now, because let's kill the NHK doesn't resonate anymore. So you can change the name of your party. It's a party of one. Let's see how that happens as we shake out. And that's it for the explanation of that particular issue, Maya. And I'd like to go on now to the other issue, if you don't mind.
No, I don't. Please go ahead.
So the other question came up is, and it's somewhat related to the let's get the the NHK. You can form a political party if you have enough oomph, if you have enough supporters who like you. With Gassi, it was possible because of social media, and he was a YouTuber, and he was saying things that people liked to hear and that were funny, and so they voted for him. On a separate issue, people have asked about the Ainu. Who are the Ainu? And do they have a political representation in the Diet? And with the Ainu, I think, as you know, Maya, you were in Hokkaido, so I'm sure you were familiar. Maybe you've run into Ainu people, but the Ainu are a ethnic group of Japan. They are not Japanese. They are structurally, genetically, physically different from the Japanese. They've been here longer than the Japanese have been here. And they occupy Sakhalin, Hokkaido, northern regions of Tohoku, and they're not quite sure how they came here. They believe it was maybe through the Siberian route. because there's a large population of Ainu also in Russia. But the Ainu have been almost a hated ethnic group by the Japanese since way before the Edo period. And there were proms to exterminate these people, to take over the lands. They were hunters, gatherers, and fishermen. They weren't farmers so much as the Yayoi or the Yamato people were. And as Yayoi turned into, first it was Jomon, and the Yayoi and then the Yamato people, as that history came up and we moved into the Edo period, there were physical forces brought to bear on taking the Ainu out and capturing all of Honshu. So eventually what happened, go ahead.
Sorry, what were the reasons for that? Couldn't they coexist here? Why did they have to actually try to push the Ainu people away?
Gaijinda. I don't know. I mean, it's probably just, it's just like, the American Indians and the Westerners, we want what you have. You might have been here first, but we're better. We have a writing system. We have a culture and language, and our stomachs are longer and our snow is different. There are 100 reasons, I guess.
Oh.
But we see these stories over and over again. But the point is, with the Ainu, they were eventually pushed up. This castle that's in Sendai was created as a component of exterminating and pushing the Ainu further and further out of Honshu. So the reason for the castles and the samurai swords and all of this infighting was not just because of these different Buddhist sects and these different warlords fighting against each other. It was also to push these Ainu out and capture more, take over more land and field for, a growing Yamato population. So it was just almost an extermination, and pushing them into Hokkaido. Eventually, in the Edo period, they relinquished basically Hokkaido. They said, we're not going to make that much effort in Hokkaido. We'll make some trade treaties with the Ainu, and we'll trade. And so it entered into a period of peace until maybe before the World War. And then this, Japan is one nation and we adore the emperor and we're going to create these colonies throughout the world. It began to change then. So as it stands right now, the census in Japan has officially recognized 25,000 Ainu, mostly in Hokkaido. There are about 2,700 in Tokyo. That means that's about 10% of the Ainu population resides in the Tokyo area, actually the metropolitan area. There are officially recognized maybe 300 people who are pure Ainu, and they all reside in Hokkaido. And in 1966, the census reported on the number of Ainu, and compared to the number in 1988, there was a 2/3 reduction. So a lot of the people who are Ainu or who believe they are Ainu have been assimilated into the Japanese population. Initially, during the Edo period, they would separate the men from the women. The women were forced to marry Japanese men, and the men were sent for different areas and colonies and working on ships and that sort of thing. So there was a specific purpose of disassimilating them, not really assimilating, disassimilating them. And so as it stands right now, there are plenty of Ainu in Hokkaido. You can see them, but they have been extinct. And they use that word when they're talking about the census numbers. They are extinct in the Tohoku region. There are not that very many people. They've all gravitated towards Hokkaido. Some of them are coming to the main capital city of Tokyo. There are 10% of them that live in the Tokyo metropolitan region. And even today, you can go to fishing villages in Hokkaido or just normal fishing ports and come across them. And the question and the reason why we're having this conversation now is there a political party that represents the Ainu as an ethnic group? And the answer there is no. They do not have a member in the parliament who is an Ainu. I do recall there being one who was of Ainu heritage at one time, but I don't think there is a seat being held by an Ainu heritage holding individual now. But they also don't have such a large constituency. So having a large constituency, I mean, at least with this YouTuber, he had 288,000 people who subscribed to his videos. And presumably, some of those, or a large number of those, voted for him when he ran for election. With the Ainu, there aren't that many people. It's not such a big issue. People aren't talking about them being disenfranchised or being browbeaten or being discriminated against, even though they are. But there have been certain programs to identify the Ainu culture and language. There's a museum that's now set up there. There's controversy from time to time. Tado Aso made a kind of a, well, I don't know if it would be a derogatory statement. He mentioned in maybe 15 years ago that Japan is one nation, it is one culture, one heritage, one religion. We are one people, and that created a lot of controversy, particularly with regard to the Ainu, because they consider themselves to be Japanese citizens. They pay taxes, even though they are at the lower strata of the economic. Very few of them actually finish the compulsory education, and they are on the lower side of the economic scale. They receive a vast proportion of their income from government subsidies and help for poor family assistance. So there's that there. But with regard to democratic representation, it is very skinny, and it's not likely. There are people who belong. They have the Ainu Association of Hokkaido that does lobby for its issues and makes its voice known, but they haven't been big enough or more powerful enough to actually elect a representative from Hokkaido, is my latest information. If anybody knows differently, I'd like to hear that from you. But I just did want to respond to that question that was raised in our last Q&A last week, Maya.
Yes, I think that we can hear about that in Clubhouse. If you
Okay.
have finished now, we can move there and, talk with everybody who is there, of course.
Terrific.
Okay, great.
And one other thing before we sign off, Maya, there are a couple of things actually. One of my sons found this on YouTube, on the internet.
How about this? Okay.
Is that incredible?
It is,
so this
yes. Gaijin Seiji. Now, could you show it once again? Gaijin Seiji Hisho, Daiichi Go. How about that? And that's you on the cover, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is the book that I published 30 years ago as a consequence of working in the Diet. And people have asked me, where can we see that book? I don't know. It went through 2 publications. I'm sure they were mostly burned or thrown away. But when my son found this, he immediately bought it. I think he paid maybe 700 yen for it, because I don't have any copies. I have a copy that my mother gave to me because she said, this is a copy that you gave me. I don't have any in my library. I don't know what happened to them. So what an interesting thing to happen, and a gift from one of my sons to.
Indeed, that's wonderful. Maybe it's time to republish it once again.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't very funny the first time. I don't think it'd be funny the second time.
Well, I think that it's difficult to make it funny when you talk about experiences in the Diet. It could be, of course, like the guy who created the YouTube channel, the Gassy channel, but still, you don't have to be funny when you talk about politics. Not all the time, okay?
Well, there's a lot to laugh about, that's for sure. But it's true that when you talk about Japanese politics, there is no, like in American or in British culture, there's a lot of satire, there's a lot of commentary, there's a lot of discussion about what's going on in politics, in home politics. They make fun of people, they make caricatures and stuff like that. That doesn't happen in this country, and there's a couple of good reasons why that happens, and I think a lot of that is an outgrowth of Mr. Abe's control of the press and this controversy that's going on with Takaichi, with this trying to control the press clubs and the newscasting and that sort of thing. But it is interesting that there is no channel that's talking about, poking fun at people and just identifying, how ridiculous it is that that the Prime Minister says he's going to do this at an unprecedented level, and then this is the outcome of that. What's going on here? So,
Indeed,
but I'm
yes.
not promoting myself as doing that.
No, please. I love how you inject the humor, into the briefings, but let's keep it at this level for the moment. You never know
Sounds
what happens
good.
in the future.
Thanks,
Right.
good.
Great.
So that's about it from me, Maya. Is there anything else that we should touch upon before we go into our Q&A?
Well, I think that we can continue with other topics next week, of course, talking about things that are not talked about in the press, like, once again, maybe governmental assets and what else? We talked about other things as well. But however, let's finish the briefing here, the live stream, and we can move to Clubhouse. So let's continue there.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I was just distracted. I apologize. So let's go into Q&A.
Sure.
Woo-hoo!
Let's do that. Okay, so thank you for being here on YouTube, LinkedIn, and also Facebook. We'll see you in Clubhouse.
Thanks, Maya.
soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you